Hey everybody, welcome back. Time for yet another top 10 favorite films for each letter. This one for the letter T. Much like for the letter S, this one was a hard one to really get down to 10. In fact, so much more that also today, just like the last one, right before I hit record, I had to make a final decision. Now, I wanted to wear a t-shirt today that had one of the letter T's on it, and one of them, well, I do have a couple shirts for, but because I do want to take a walk outside, I don't want to freak out any of my neighbors, I did decide to go with something a little bit more fun, and that is my Teen Wolf shirt, even though Teen Wolf, not to spoil anything, but is actually not one among the 10, even though I do love the film. So feel free to call me out on wearing a shirt for a film that's not on the list. So as always, going in alphabetical order, first up is Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. This is one that I am just mesmerized by every single time I watch it. You know, I mean, if you watch Taxi Driver, I mean, just from a technical standpoint, it is astonishing. And I've been lucky enough to actually see the film a couple times in the theater. I've seen it twice in 35mm prints, one of which was really cool. It was actually on my birthday one year when I was still living in Chicago. I noticed it was playing at the Gene Siskel Theater downtown, and it was my birthday, and I'm just like, you know what, I'm just gonna go. Pretty faded and stuff, but still, you know, it was awesome to watch it like that. So yeah, Taxi Driver, oh, what a movie. And one of my all-time top 10 favorites as well. Next up is James Cameron's The Terminator. Now, I debated going back and forth between the original Terminator and Terminator 2, which I love both kind of equally, really. The reason why I decided to kind of go for the first one for the list, so I could make room for other movies instead of just listing them both, is the fact that because the original Terminator is a low-budget film, again, from a filmmaking standpoint, that is very inspiring what they were able to do with such a small budget. Next up, which actually is the shirt I was going to wear today, but because I may see some neighbors, I decided to, you know, kind of be a good boy, and that is Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. One of my favorite films of all time. This is such an amazing, incredible film, and what I love about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, outside of the fact that it is terrifying and has that almost pseudo-realistic feel to it, like very few other films have. I mean, I still remember the first time I saw the film. I mean, you know, my jaw was on the floor. But also as the years went on, I got a lot more of the dark humor elements of it. So now, actually, you know, there's so much of it I find really funny. For me, it is such an incredible film. I mean, one that was very early on this list. Next one is probably my favorite science fiction / giant insect movie, and that is Them. As much as I love a lot of the other ones that came out during, like, you know, the 50s and 60s and stuff, and even just some of the science fiction films in general from back then, there is something about Them that I think is, outside of just the entertainment value of it, but it's so terrifying, and also from a filmmaking standpoint, it works so well. I mean, yeah, you can basically tell that the giant ants are a little bit mechanical, but for me, I still think they're extremely effective. And even as much of a classic as Them is, I still think it's a little bit underappreciated, but maybe that's just me. Next up, we'll come to a surprise to no one, and that is John Carpenter's The Thing. I would say The Thing is probably my second favorite John Carpenter film, and it's one I watch multiple times a year. And I've talked about it a lot in other videos, so I won't kind of go overboard here because I think I've mentioned how much I love the film. Even talking about it right now makes me want to just put it on and watch it. But I have to finish the video first. Next up is one of my favorite films of all time, and arguably one of the best films ever made, in my opinion, and that is The Third Man. I love The Third Man so much. It has so many elements to it that every time I watch it, I'm just constantly reminded how incredible the film is and how multi-layered it is and how unique it is. And another one, every time Turner Classic Movies shows it and I see that it's on, even if I see like half a second of it, it stays on for me. Next one is an interesting choice, and that is George Lucas's THX 1138. Now, that may seem like an odd choice, considering especially some of the films I took off this list where you may be like, why? And I just had to go with a personal choice, and that is, there's just something so fascinating to me about THX 1138. Speaks to me both as a film fan and a filmmaker, both at the same time. And whenever I get that going at the same time. Those types of films really just speak to me on a certain level, so that's why I had to include it on this list. Next up is Time After Time. In my opinion, such an underrated film. It stars Malcolm McDowell, Mary Steenburgen, and David Warner, and it's one of those great sort of what-if movies. You know, what if H.G. Wells actually did develop a time machine, and what if he was actually friends with the guy who turned out to be Jack the Ripper, and Jack the Ripper jumps in the time machine and jumps into the future from that standpoint. And so H.G. Wells has to then go to the future to stop him, future being 1979 from that standpoint. The thing is, I love fish out of water stories, so to see Malcolm McDowell's H.G. Wells sort of, you know, trying to learn the, you know, modern world at that point, I just absolutely love. It's, you know, it's hilarious. But then you have the seriousness of David Warner's Jack the Ripper. Like, he's not comical, you know, he's very serious, and he's a killer. And I think that's what I love about the film, is that it walks a fine line between all these different tones. You have comedic elements, you have a romance, and then you have these very dark elements with Jack the Ripper and everything. And it's an amazing film. If you've never seen Time After Time, go check it out somewhere. I don't know if it's streaming or not, but I mean, do yourself a favor and watch it. Good chance you may actually enjoy it. I don't know about as much as I do, but I think you'll like it. Next one is my favorite trauma film, and that is The Toxic Avenger. Now, I wanted to have a trauma film somewhere on one of these lists, because the thing is, you know, when you grow up watching trauma films, I think there's sort of, you have a special appreciation for them because they are so over the top and funny, and you have the insane gore and nudity and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But The Toxic Avenger was one of the, I don't know if it was the first one, but it was one of the first ones I ever saw. And, you know, it was the kind of thing that really made me fall in love with not only trauma films, but I think even B movies. And for some reason, I'm obsessed about a line in the trailer for The Toxic Avenger where you have the drunk guy who's like, he's a hero, and then the voiceover of the trailer comes in, he's a hero.
He was a hero. He's a hero.
I don't know why, for some reason I think that is so funny. Welcome to how my brain works. And then finally, to round out the tease, and that is Turbo Kid. I was lucky enough to see Turbo Kid several months before it really, I think it had played maybe once beforehand. I saw it with my buddy Lyndall at a film festival, and I didn't really know anything about it. I think he had seen the trailer, and he was like, hey, you know, why don't we go check this out? And boy, did I fall in love with this film. I mean, it's one of those films where I think if you watch it, you'll understand why I love it as much as I do. It's an homage to 80s films, and it has a bizarre sense of humor. It has a sweetness to it, almost a slight innocence to it, but then it has this over-the-top Sam Raimi, Peter Jackson like gore and violence in it. And boy, do I love the music. That's a soundtrack I listen to a lot as well. Yeah, I definitely obsessed over Turbo Kid when it came out, and I don't think that obsession has gone away. So that's it for the letter T. Definitely a very hard list, even much more so than the letter S was. I mean, this list was so long, and I went back and forth on so many of these titles. But again, at the end of the day, I just have to pick personal favorites. But there were a couple I took off, and I was like, oh man, that hurts. So definitely let me know your picks for the letter T. Keep an eye out for the next one, which should be the letter U. And as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.